Welcome back to Fireside Frith, the podcast brought to you by the Asatru Community. Together, we'll inspire inclusivity, share wisdom, and strengthen the bonds of our Norse Pagan community. Join me as I explore topics like holy days and creative ways to celebrate, whether you're a solo practitioner or part of a group, leadership within our faith and communities, and the mythology and history that guide our spiritual paths. Along the way, my guests and I will share stories, traditions, and insights, and do our best to answer community questions, all with the goal of inspiring the Asatru community and beyond. Today, I'm so excited to record our first ever Meet the Clergy episode. Our special guest today is one of the Asatru community's clergy members, and we'll be diving into a variety of fascinating topics, including divination, their experiences as a clergy member, their travels, and advice to those new to Asatru. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's get started. Just to start off, would you like to introduce yourself today?
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Phoenix, and I joined the Asatru community in 2018. I've been practicing Heathenry since around 2016 myself, and it's been quite a journey. It's nice, and I'm happy to be here on the podcast. And I want to say sorry if there's background noise, because I do have dogs, and they get excited when I sit to do something like this. So
I understand. I had to shut mine out. So yeah, no worries. I think you already kind of answered a little bit just with your little intro. Our first question, what drew you to the Asatru community, and what does being a part of TAC mean to you?
So I actually became interested in Asatru. I was previously in another pagan tradition before this, because I had a spiritual experience with my practice where a Norse deity came through, and I was just really drawn to her, and I was drawn to the energy. And that kind of catapulted my own research into the Norse pantheon itself around 2016. And with that, let's be honest, the Asatru community has really, really good SEO, so search engine optimization, because like the word Asatru, the word community, very popular on Google. So it's one of the first organizations I came across in my researching Asatru and Norse Heathenry, and I just really resonated with it.
That's awesome. Well, that's good to hear. I don't control that part of TAC. I have nothing to do with the SEO, but yes, absolutely. That is exactly how I came across TAC as well, just looking for those things. What inspired you to become a clergy member of TAC?
I feel that our representation is super important, and I personally feel like the more public, the more people we have in clergy and recognized doing things like weddings and things, the better, because it really legitimizes our faith, in my opinion, as a world religion on par with other world religions as well. So I've always been very interested in that aspect of that leadership, the doing the weddings, doing the funerals, doing those kinds of things. And I wanted to do the life rites, I can just call them, and not just weddings, but also birthing celebrations and confirmations of faith, or whatever you want to call it, initiation, dedication, those sorts of things. That's something I feel is very important for people, and a lot of pagan religions, or especially some pagan religions, have difficulty finding a clergy member locally or someone willing and knowledgeable that could do those sorts of life rites for them, in my opinion, or my experience. And that's really what drew me to becoming a clergy member, to getting my ordination, was being able to provide those life rites. But I do want to talk about later on that my path in clergy since then has been quite different from what I intended.
I'm sure. Life has a way of just throwing the randomest things at us and kind of forcing us to roll with it. What are some of your responsibilities as a clergy member, and what does this role mean to you on a deeper, more personal level?
I'm going to answer that a little reverse. I feel like being a clergy member is really a form of dedication to serving the gods and goddesses. And really that's what being a Gothar is all about, is being of service to the divine. And it's not so much like an intermediary as it is just, this is my form of worshiping and honoring my deities, is by doing this. And that's how I kind of approach it, is like everybody's form of worship and practice looks different, and that's a great thing. And putting yourself out there and saying, I'm willing to do these things, these responsibilities, is one way that I personally practice my faith. The responsibilities that those are, again, we have the life rights, being in a position of leadership, being able to do things like legal weddings, being able to provide over celebrations of life, being able to provide that comfort, that support for people in a religious setting. And I feel like confidentiality is a big part of it too, because people come to clergy members with spiritual problems, and that, like I said in the last question, my path has been quite different from what I intended. Is that's the kind of stuff that I seem to be getting a lot of in my practice, is, the spiritual guidance aspect, which is great. And that's a big part of being a clergy too, is being willing to accept that kind of interaction with people. It can be very intimate, it can be very emotional, it can be very vulnerable. And again, there's a high level of confidentiality there as well, because these people are trusting you, and the gods are trusting you with this information and being able to bring through that guidance.
That makes sense. In a lot of other religions that I've seen, it seems like the go-to answer to those more counseling sessions is always, we'll just lean on your gods or God. Usually it's God and the specific things I'm thinking of. And sometimes that answer isn't as comforting to people as you want it to be. So I can imagine with the number of pagans that don't have support from families or friends when coming out as pagan, it's like you have no one to turn to. So I can imagine that would kind of take over a lot of your practice.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting to me. I went in thinking, I can do these life rites. And again, not just weddings, but, celebrations of life, birthing, dedications, things of that nature. I thought, this is great. I can do these things. I can give people a pagan way of doing it. That's not so much what people came to me about, which is fine. But it was definitely something that made me rethink my definition of clergy quite a lot.
I'd say so. Okay, have there been any particularly meaningful moments in your work as a clergy member that just stand out?
I've actually had 2 situations with people that came to me that were really touching, and it was also like, wow, like I'm actually having a big impact on this person's life. Yeah, there's 2 of them. And so the first one was someone from overseas reached out for spiritual guidance, who was trying to get a community of Norse pagans in an area where there isn't really any representation at all. And that was challenging for me because I wasn't local to this person, but I tried to encourage them to, read the Eddas and gather and talk about the Eddas, to have discussions about it. And I actually sent them some Molnir pennants in the mail because they didn't have access to those where they were living, and it was interesting because it was so distant and it was international, but at the same time, people really need this kind of support, even if it's not physically local. That was my first experience with that. And then I have another experience where someone totally unrelated came, and initially they wanted a life rights service, but that didn't happen in the end. But instead, it ended up opening up an avenue for a very difficult decision that they wanted spiritual guidance from. Like, what would the gods do? What is the honorable thing to do in this situation? So we talked about it. That was a little outside my comfort zone because I was not experienced with this situation, like the environment. Like, I had no way to connect myself to it, It was something that I had no life experience with. But again, I was like, okay, well, the Eddas say this, and your relationship with your gods is your own, I encouraged them to pray about it, but also to believe in themselves, basically, that,
Right.
The answer would come to them through their own intuition, their own practice.
Do you feel that being a clergy member kind of makes you, obviously you become a counselor, and that's something that I think people don't realize when they first become clergy. So do you feel that you end up becoming that role for people?
That's something you kind of have to tiptoe around because of laws. And that's something, again, that makes me a little uncomfortable because, again, laws are a thing, it's very stipulated. But again, as clergy, we do have a responsibility to provide that spiritual support and guidance. And when I'm phrasing this, because I also do readings, I always have to say spiritual guidance, religious guidance, spiritual guidance. So that is challenging. And I do feel like, not in tax curriculum, but in a lot of things that I've researched, because I come from a Wiccan background as well, there's less of a highlight, in my opinion, on the pastoral counseling than I feel like there needs to be in a lot of information. And that's not any specific group, because I'm sure there's many groups that have a lot of information around that. But especially for pagans, it's like you can't just tell people, oh, go pray about it. That's like brushing them off, especially in Asatru. Asatru, our ethics are that we are industrious, we do things, we take the actions, and our deeds are what we're judged on and things. A lot of Asatru believe that. And so telling someone, oh, just go pray about it is really counterproductive. It's like the gods don't want you complaining about your problems. Like, okay, what do I do with this? So that's been a bit of a challenge, because I do get people coming to me with situations quite a lot that they need guidance for, both with the readings as well as the clergy side of it. And it's like, okay, what do we tell people if we can't tell people just to pray about it? So, you have to think about, what do the Eddas say? What do the sagas say? What do people do historically when they have a problem? And I am a big fan of the source material, the primary source. So my big go-to is like either the Havamalls or the Eddas and sagas. And I've read them all, like the Havamalls and the saga, like a lot of the sagas, not all of them, of course, as there's so many, but if you're going to read any book at all, in my opinion, that's the go-to, because everything else is based off that in some way, shape, or form. So it is challenging. It wasn't too surprising, because going into a clergy role, like pastoral counseling is a thing. People are going to come to me for that. It's a part of the job, but it's also something that is very important, and it's really just a learning curve.
It makes sense too. Was it also a learning curve to develop a good boundary between you as a person and giving that pastoral care? Just making sure that you have enough energy to give your people that you serve, essentially?
That's such a tough question. I feel like I haven't gotten that far. I don't know, honestly. I don't know, because that's really difficult to answer for me. I really don't know, because I do have friends that ask me for advice, and it's not the same as a stranger coming to you and saying, hey, you're a clergy person, what would you do with this? But in any case, any advice that anyone asks for, or the situations, I do treat them very confidentially, because people are coming to me with trust, with their vulnerable problem, and I am very confidential with that. And spiritual guidance is going to differ depending on who you're talking to in the situation. There's not like a band-aid one size fits all, but the boundaries are important. I feel like I would answer that better with my work than I would with my clergy, if I had to think about it, because I do spiritual work too. That kind of falls in the similar category. It's not the same, but it's similar. I think one of the most important things is to be very objective with it. You don't want to just give an opinion, but you want to look at what is an objective piece of advice, whether it's actionable or not, that would make sense for the situation. Whether you yourself would think it's a good idea or not, that's not my decision. If it spiritually makes sense for the situation, it's an option that person can or cannot implement.
Yeah. So the reason why I asked that is because both me and some of the other members in leadership, we've been discussing this recently, having strong boundaries, not because we don't love the people, but in order to provide tact to everyone. We work at this a lot. We put a lot of energy into it. And sometimes you gotta protect your peace by taking a day off. That doesn't mean saying absolutely no. Be like, well, I have time to talk on this day, or tomorrow, unless it's you know what I mean? I'm still learning how to protect that peace. And I think it's just important for the community to know that it's okay to protect your peace.
Yeah, and sometimes it does mean saying no. Some situations, people just can't deal with. And my rule of thumb with any spiritual work at all, whether it's readings, whether it's pastoral care, whether it's religious, whether it's spiritual, is nothing is an emergency. Okay.
Right.
That's like important to me. If they need help right now, this second, they need to be talking to another person that is suited to be an emergency. Like, the
Right.
doctor, the fire department, a mental health professional. We're not emergency care providers. Spiritual things do happen, yes, and it may be a spiritual issue, but nothing is right now emergency. Okay.
Exactly.
That's what I tell myself, because I actually had a client, and this is not TAC related, but it was a psychic reading tarot client who messaged me one day and said she needed an emergency reading right now. And I stopped giving her readings completely because it made me uncomfortable. Because that red flag to me is saying this is not a spiritual thing, this is something else. This is medical, this is mental health, this is something else. And that's not something that I'm equipped to deal with.
Right. It's outside of the scope of practice.
Yes, exactly. So I was like, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this problem, and I suggested maybe talk to some other people. But I mean, that's something sometimes we have to do because we're not medical, we're not mental, we're not the EMT. So
Right.
If you're having an emergency, call someone that is an emergency provider, not your clergy person.
No, you're absolutely right.
I feel like that's a boundary thing. We don't have to be on call. If your priest is on call, that's not a good sign. You need help.
Yeah.
Which is sad, but...
Yeah, sad, but possibly true. So this third set of questions is about your divination practice. Divination is an important practice in many pagan traditions. What role does it play in your personal practice, in your work as a clergy member, and just for you personally?
Divination is a huge part of my personal practice. It is something I do quite a lot of. And in the clergy practice, I do a lot less of the divination than I do otherwise. Yeah, which is interesting to me because being a clergy person, you're not necessarily a psychic advisor. That's not the role. It's important to have a spiritual tool set because we do have to deal with spiritual things. That's our job. So knowing one or two methods of divination, I feel like it's super important. Whether or not you practice those regularly, that's going to be up to you. When I've been dealing with clergy things specifically, at the end of any kind of conversation, if someone comes to me with a problem, I think about it. Sometimes it takes me a while to get back to them because I have to think about it quite a lot. I will ask for divine guidance and meditate. What is really going on? What would I do in this situation? But I don't usually do divination unless they specifically ask for it. And after I talk to them about what my opinion of it is, then I will ask them, would you like me to do a reading on this situation? Because I want that to be an option because it is a spiritual practice. Some people want that direct confirmation from the runes, from the gods, from their ancestors, whatever the case is. And sometimes that's very impactful for the person, but a lot of times I've found that divination is not actually something that's necessary with my clergy work. So I think I've done maybe one reading for someone that had a religious situation. I seem to keep my divination a little separate from my clergy work, which is surprising. But it is something I offer because I know that it is impactful for people, especially if they're thinking about making a big decision.
Cool. It is interesting how it seems like it's such a big part of your life. And then on the clergy side, you're like, yeah, but I do more of other things, I always had my divination as a very personal thing. I never did it for other people. Honestly, the last couple years, when I was in basic training, they would have me pull out my runes for every event that was going on. I'm like, you guys don't even believe this stuff. They were like, yeah, but we want to know what the runes say just because maybe you have foresight, maybe they are going to say something to you. And every time I would tell them, it's going to be okay.
Was it accurate though?
It was. Hagalas kept coming up whenever we talked about the very final exercise. And we're 2 weeks away from graduation. I drew Hagalas, and you know how it's storms, and it wasn't stormy. So it wasn't a literal thing, but that was a really hard thing that she went through. it was just interesting that like everyone who drew something after I told them what it meant, it made sense after we finished the exercise. And so there was a couple girls that were like, where can I buy tarot cards? Like, after basic training, I'll probably never see you again. Where can I buy runes? I want to research this a little more. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, divination's interesting because a lot of times it will happen for the person, but the way you interpret it is going to really depend. It's going to vary significantly. Like, just because Hagala shows up, it could be like an emotional problem. It could be something that you just go through a really difficult period and everyone thinks you're doing great, but inside you're like, oh my gosh, this is like the worst thing.
It tends to be my interpretation. Like, something's about to be really difficult, really hard. Whether it's physical, mental, work, that's me trying to be more general, especially when other people are involved, because I don't want to cause them to have anxiety. But that's just me. Divination for other people is not my specialty. Are there any specific forms of divination you specialize in? I know you talked about the runes already, and you've mentioned tarot here and there.
Yes. So I feel like I have 3 main tools that I use a lot is the runes, the tarot, and crystal ball scrying. That's a pretty unique one.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Yeah, and I also read oracle cards. And I actually started with a combination of the oracle cards and the crystal ball scrying when I started reading professionally. And now I've just kind of replaced the oracle with the tarot. At first, I was uncomfortable with the tarot because it's like 78 cards. Like, that's a lot of cards. Like, that's too many. The more I work with them, the more I feel like each tool is very unique. And I feel like each person needs to find the tool that resonates with them the most. But I've found in my personal readings, my opinion is that the oracle cards are good for a more this is what's happening, like a more ethereal approach to it. And the tarot is very specific and specialized. There's a lot more detail in it. It's a lot more practical. It's a lot more like, you can do this thing. You did this thing. This thing is going to happen. Whereas the oracle is more like, here is a period of emotional stability coming up. Or, you know, a period of sensitivity is coming, things like that. And then the crystal ball scrying is extremely direct. That's kind of a lot. That one kind of sets people back. It's like, oh, wow. It's very direct, but it's a very big picture. And that is, it's a lot of information condensed into a very compact package, and I feel like that takes the most time to really process. And the runes are, I would say they're more similar to the crystal ball than they are to the cards, in my opinion. Of course, I do the runes being if they're a clergy person, you have to kind of know at least about the runes because it's part of the lore. You don't have to read them, but it's a big part of the religion. So I do read the runes because divination is something I do a lot of in my personal practice. And I really like the runes. I like them a lot because I feel like each one has a lot of depth to it. And, you know, there's only 24. I like the idea that it's a symbol. It's literally a shape, and it can be multifaceted. It's not words, it's not just a picture, it's a shape, and it can mean so many different things depending on where it falls, how it falls, what that shape means to you. And I do feel like because of that, it's really a great tool to kind of confirm things. And I feel like it fits really well with the scrying because you get the big picture with the ball, and then the runes are like, okay, this area is what we're talking about. And we can get more specific into that. It's like, what do I need to know about that? And it's like, you need to, you know, roots is like stability. It's like, you need to build a better foundation here, or things like that, you know, and I do like it, but it is unique. Like, everyone is unique. Every tool is unique. And that's just kind of my observations doing these readings. I just remembered I have kind of a story about a rune, if we have time.
Of course.
So I am not a patient person. I'm a Virgo, but I'm not a patient person. I don't like to wait. So I actually tattooed the rune Isa on myself. And I thought Isa is ice, it's patience, it's waiting. And I was a little apprehensive because I'm like, this could make me be stuck where I'm at for like decades. But it's also the foundation of every other rune is a line. So it's like, I can always change it to be anything, right?
Right.
So I've noticed over the past couple of years, I have really gained a lot of patience. And other people have noticed this about me. And they're like, wow, you're so much more patient. Yeah. And it wasn't bad. And it was like, I actually want to add some lines to make it something else. And I have like this whole plan that my one line is going to become the Web of Weird eventually.
Love that.
Because it starts with Isa, and then I'm just going to add more runes as I go, because the Web of Weird has all the runes, from my understanding.
Yes.
So I'm building it, one rune at a time up until I'm complete, is kind of my mindset. I have noticed I've been so much more patient since doing that. And when I'm stuck in traffic, or I'm stuck in a line, and I'm running late, instead of panicking about it and being really irritated, I now just say, you know what, this is out of my control. I don't care. That's my attitude towards waiting.
That's awesome. So you're able to kind of let go.
Yeah, I think the rune really helped that, because in icicle, sometimes we have to wait in life, and it's not the end of the world. It's like, what am I going to do? I know that's like my little story about how the rune helped me.
Love that. That's awesome. I hope I have a similar experience. My husband and I just got some runes tattooed. He wanted something to inspire him. Okay, are you ready for the witch talk questions?
Okay.
So, witch talk has become a major force in modern paganism, introducing many people to Norse practices. What are your thoughts on witch talk, both its positives and its challenges?
It's a heavy topic because it's so many things. And I've been active on witch talk for several years. Not so much the Norse side, surprisingly, but more so the general witch talk. I have dipped my toes into the Norse side and seen what it's about. And I would say, it's definitely not a primary source. Don't take it as like the word, because there's a lot of just opinions. And not every opinion is based in sources. I feel like it's ultimately a positive, because it's really pushing paganism as a whole into the mainstream. You're getting billions of views every day around the world about these practices. I feel like, good or bad, regardless of the information, so many people are seeing an alternative to what they've seen their whole lives. And that might be someone's first experience seeing something other than a traditional religious church that they might have grown up in. And I feel like that alone is a very powerful thing, because it's showing people that, hey, you don't have to be stuck in something that you don't believe in, or, other people have a lot of religious trauma, and there's something else out there. Okay, and like that's what it's telling people, is like there's something else out here, and you don't have to give up on God to believe in something, Yeah, that's kind of been my overall opinion, is that I think that's a very good thing. However, again, there's not so good sides, there's good sides. The little bit of Norse Pagan talk, Asatru TikTok I've seen, I feel like it's very like close-knit community. It's almost to the point that some of it feels uncomfortable, like cultish a little bit, in my opinion, because it's like, okay, you're saying you're part of this clan, and you only talk to these 5 people in this clan, like that. I don't know. I don't like that.
Yeah, it's also just strange to me that I know clan isn't inherently racist, but in this country, we have a history with that word that isn't very positive,
Yeah.
It's not like it's a banned word or anything, but when people are like, I'm part of the whatever clan, I don't want to call anyone out, and then they like force all clan members to post it on their like socials.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, have you seen the ones that are like, you can only be in our group?
I haven't seen those.
I've been kicked out from some just for being.
Yeah, we've talked about that, and that is like, that makes me, it's sad. I mean, I'm glad that Asatru is getting out there, but at the same time, the exclusionary nature of the way that this is prevented is problematic. Definitely. Especially for new people. And it doesn't matter how inclusive they claim to be. If you can only be with them and no one else, and like you have to advertise that you're with them, that to me is a problem. It doesn't matter who they're accepting or not. It's like, that is not accepting people into the faith. That's saying only so many people that go through our process and stay loyal to us are this special group. To me, that's an issue.
Yeah, I agree.
If people are new, not all heathens identify as Asatru specifically. There's other groups. And Asatru, I believe, is true to the Aesir. I probably lean more into Vanitru than anything myself because I'm more into the Vanir pantheon of gods. A lot of people that are heathens, which I'm using as an umbrella for northern pagan traditions, have some form of military background. Whether that's their family, their parents, they're in the military, something. I found that a lot of people do. And I feel like that's because war and battle is something very honorable in heathen traditions, which makes sense. And I don't come from that. So it's a little hard for me to answer questions about the military because I don't have any background whatsoever in it, which makes me kind of unique a little bit. But, you know, I do know of some pagan groups that are trying to get a pagan chaplain into the military, but it is difficult. I know Cherry Hill Seminary is really pushing for that for years, and the ATC is also pushing for that. Aquarian Tabernacle Church, but those are both heavily Wiccan leaning organizations, which is not us.
Sure, it's not us, but circling back to witch talk, making it less taboo to talk about witchcraft or Wicca, Norse paganism, or just any kind of paganism outside of it being a bad guy in a kid's movie, you know? It's bringing up enough awareness and enough people want religious equality too. It's putting it in a place where that's valid. I know that even if they weren't Norse pagan, but there was a pagan chaplain, that would be leaps and bounds. I would be proud that we would have one, you know?
Yeah, I hope it, I really hope it happens. Because, like, it makes me very angry. I'm a big, like, equality activist person, and not just with religious equality, but just equality across the board is extremely important to me. So it really bothers me that we don't have someone at that level, because we are federally recognized. You know, we're recognized, we have accommodations. I do believe the military allows a Mjolnir to be on your headstone and a pentagram.
Really?
Yeah, so we have that. That was like a big thing a few decades ago, which is a big deal. But again, unification's hard for this because firstly, paganism as a whole, overall, in my opinion, my experience, it is very individualistic. That, you know, yes, there's covens, there's churches, there's kindreds, but those are very localized in general. There are international churches like ATC, but that's just a church. And to say pagans united, like there's been movements for it, but it gets kind of sticky because again, there's the people that we don't associate with.
Yes.
Various non-inclusive groups that are causing issues for us with the media and such. And that makes it hard because they're pagans too. Even though we don't agree with them, we may not agree with their interpretations, they're still pagans. And how can we be unified if we're at odds with people? I have a hard time with that, you know?
Yeah. It seems like something that is so fragmented that it's hard to imagine us as in pagans as a whole to put something like that together that we can agree on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there are in other countries unified pagans. I honestly don't know why there isn't something like that here in the United States. It's like, I don't know. I mean, because there's been movements for it. I mean, if you make it vague enough, we are earth-centered spirituality, and like that's the end of that.
Exactly.
How is that not unified?
It doesn't make sense to me either. So you have a different pantheon or you have a different practice. Most people celebrate Halloween of some sort. We have Samhain, Halloween, Winter Nights, you know, there's more, but also like Yule. That's a Norse thing, Wiccan thing, Celtic thing, you know what I mean? There's a lot that we can agree on. I think it's just the things that we can't agree on are heavier almost.
Yeah, I don't have the answers. Like that's the thing, is like no one has all the answers.
Right.
To everything,
and it's,
you know,
it's just something we can be hopeful about, that one day we will reach that unification.
One thing I think is helping get us to that point, besides our exposure, is interfaith with other religions. Very, very important, very powerful, in my opinion, because, you know, it puts us there on equal footing with these people. Things like Parliament of the World Religions, they see us as a valid religion, a valid belief system. It's like, how can you say we can't have a chaplain if we're standing right next to your priest? And like, I feel like the more interfaith things we can do, the more opportunities, the better opportunities we're going to see in our world as pagans.
I think a lot of people with Abrahamic religions that I meet have a preconceived notion that heathens or pagans do really scary stuff because we do sacrifices, but I think people think that it's a lot darker than it is. For my group, whatever we're feasting on, we put a little bit of everything everyone brought into a plate, and then we sacrifice that to the land Vitir and to the gods. I think the more opportunities for doing interfaith projects, we can show the rest of the folks here that we are not that. We're different than their preconceived notions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with the whole sacrifice thing, I, again, came from a Wiccan background at some point, and we call them offerings, but it's the same concept, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like the word offering feels a lot less intimidating than sacrifice. And I think some people know that. It's like, it's the same exact thing. You know, I'm leaving an apple on my altar. That's the same thing, whether it's an offering or a sacrifice. One person did ask me a question about live sacrifice, and she had a very interesting idea of it. She said, what if I go fishing and I sacrifice my catch to the deities and then eat it? And I thought that's an interesting way to do it. If you really are stuck on that idea, like, I love animals, I don't want to hurt anything, but if you're really stuck on the idea that it has to be a blood sacrifice, go fishing legally and catch your fish, your salmon, your trout, sacrifice it, and then eat it. You know, you don't want to waste it. Now, that's very important with this, is that you don't want to waste something that's sacred like life.
Right.
So you do have to eat the fish, you have to eat the thing, you know, and I mean, you would do that process anyway if you weren't doing the ritual, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, what is the difference in that situation? It's like, it made me really think about that.
Yeah, I like that, though. That's a cool take. Do you have anything else you want to say about witch talk or paganism in the media before we move on to the next part?
I do want to say that although witch talk has a bit of a reputation for not being very factual, some of it is really good. There's like 2 people on witch talk that I really like, and actually 3. It's like, I really like their content. Some of it is really, really great. There are definitely some gems out there, and people sharing things that might not be able to be found anywhere else. So you don't want to just say, oh, witch talk doesn't have any basis, because some of it does. It depends on who it is, but you don't want to take what people are doing as fact just because it's on TikTok or it's on YouTube or anywhere else. And I think I'm going to get into that when I talk a bit about beginner stuff.
So you recently had the opportunity to visit India. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yes. So I visited India in 2018. I went to India all by myself, alone. I didn't go with a tour or anything. And it was a good experience. It was great. I went with an open mind to see how different people in different cultures experience life, you know, and I actually visited some people, and it was a good experience. I wasn't there very long, but it really is eye-opening to be able to see a culture that is dramatically different from your own, but without any judgment.
Right.
And I went there with the intention to experience what life was like. And another fun fact about India is that I believe about 80% of their population is Hindu, which can fall under the broad category of pagan to many people.
Right.
It depends who you ask. But I felt like the pagan belief systems were really very respected in India. And to see a culture where a non-Abrahamic faith is the norm, really, it was welcoming. It just kind of made me more confident in what I was doing myself.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a very unique experience. Were there any cultural or spiritual insights from your trip that resonated with your practice as a Norse pagan?
I would say that the idea of offerings was generally very accepted and widespread. And that resonates again with our sacrifices, what we just talked about. It's common to see a shrine with some fruit on it. And that's something I resonate with because I leave offerings on my altar. And also, a lot of the beliefs were very similar, which is interesting too. It's widespread to believe in reincarnation. which is something I personally ascribe to. And I know for Asatru, it depends who you ask, because I don't believe the source material really says yay or nay on things like that. It's kind of a personal, how do you interpret it? How do we interpret the souls? But that is a belief that was widespread. And also, the religion is very important to people on a daily basis. And I also got to see the family values. Like, the value system was a lot different, in my opinion, than the US, which I actually liked a lot better. Was that you would have 3 or 4 generations of family members living in like a same community. It's like they don't necessarily live in the same house, but you'll have your uncles, your aunts next door, or your sibling would be across the street, and then grandma lives with the parents. And it's like there was communities of people living in close proximity within walking distance that were like several generations. It's very different from here, where you might only see your extended family twice a year. It's like these people are seeing them every day, and it's just a normal part of life. And I think that's something that really resonates with Asatru as well, because we have the kin concept, we have the frith, and a lot of that ties into those family bonds.
That's cool to see in such a different culture, such similar things. All right, this is a bonus question. Did you go to any temples or religious monuments when you were there?
Yes, I wanted to go to all of them because, I'm a clergy person, so it's like I have to see all the religious things with my open mind, no judgment and all of this, because I want to see how it's done. I did not get to go to a Muslim mosque. I did not get to do that, which was a little slightly disappointing, but that's okay. The people that I was with were Sikh religion, and we talked a lot about the beliefs. Actually, we pretty much agreed on everything in some form or shape, which was surprising. It's like the Sikh religion they're monotheistic, but having the multiple deities, it was okay because they're all aspects of divinity. And like, that's kind of how we thought about it. It's like, yes, they have multiple prophets too, but they're all aspects of God, right? And to me, that makes sense in a polytheistic. Now, I'm more strictly polytheistic, as that I believe the gods are separate people. Again, at the end of the day, they're all divine, and they're all aspects of divinity. So are we, because we come from them. So that's kind of how I thought about it. But we're not that different, really. Yeah. We're all believing in something bigger than us, although they have different names and shapes and forms. Now, another aspect of the religion was the holy garments that they wear.
Yes.
We talked about the meaning of that, and that was very nice. But we also have holy garments. With Asatru, it's different because it's like you don't have to wear a certain thing, but there are certain tools that we use during our ceremonies, which serve similar purposes. So for them, it's like life is basically like you're living your belief system. So you carry your tools with you all the time. Like, that's how I understood it. Now, I can't speak for them. I did read a book on the religion before I went because I wanted to know what I was experiencing. I feel like that's important. I do think people should go do things like this, see different cultures that are vastly different, not on the same continent as you, because if you go from the US to Canada, that doesn't really count. If you're from Europe, go to China, see what it's like.
Right.
If you're from the US, go to some place like India, because it is very different. Really, there are quite a lot of similarities if we get past the technicals of it. So I did go to the Sikh temple, the Golden Temple.
Oh, I bet it was beautiful.
Yeah, I went there. It was really crowded. It was just this big, huge line, but it was nice. And then I went to one Hindu temple, and it was interesting because the people I was with were not Hindu, but we went anyway. And they had the statues, and then they all had a banana in front of them, which I thought was nice. That was cool. The offering. And all the temples serve you lunch every day. Yeah, it's a small portion, but like that's the thing they do because they're sharing the abundance of God, I guess you would say. Roughly, like God, not in like the Christian God, but like of the divine source.
Yes.
And I think, that's interesting that's part of the culture and it's part of the beliefs. Both the Sikh and the Hindus give you a piece of food. So we had our banana. We had I don't remember what it's called. There's a certain name for it, but it's made of ghee. And it's like this food, and we had that at the Sikh temple. Yeah, and it was good. I wanted to see the different temples, how they do things, and it made me wonder, like, why don't we have temples like this?
Funding mostly.
I wish we had more temples. That's part of the thing I became the clergy, because we need to have this visibility. Like, even if it's just so other churches see, wow, they have a building. It's important.
How do you think global perspectives can influence and enrich Norse pagan practices?
With this question, I'm reminded of the hospitality concept in Asatru, and I don't want to read any list of ethics or anything because they're controversial. Different groups make them, but I think most, or if not all, heathens believe in some form of hospitality, whatever you want to call it, generosity, something of that sort, in my interpretation. And that's because in the Eddas and the sagas, you have a lot of traveling. Even Odin was a traveler. He went to someone's house disguised and received hospitality. They don't know who he is. They don't know his culture. They don't know his background. They don't know where he came from or his belief systems, any of that. And yet they offered him the hospitality.
Right.
And there was a similar story, I believe, in the Eddas about Thor doing something similar, staying with a family, and they ate his goat or something. The point is that he stayed with the family. They showed hospitality. They had a meal together. They didn't know where he came from. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know why he was traveling. They didn't know his beliefs, his experiences, any of that. And when it comes to international travel, these experiences, it really puts us in that position, not only to receive hospitality from unknown sources, but to give the hospitality and the open mind to people that we don't know. And I do feel like there's so many examples in our primary sources for Asatru and Heathenry of people interacting with foreigners that they have no clue where they came from or who they are or why they're traveling. And we can extend that in the modern day to travel as well to places that we're the outsiders, or maybe we're accepting outsiders into our lives and showing that hospitality. And I think that these interactions with people and in an open mind, it doesn't matter where they're from, it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter why they're traveling, they're still people, they still need food, they still need clothes, they still need a place to live. That is really a way to practice the principle of hospitality at its core.
I think that totally encompasses all of that. Like, you're right. It is. Getting outside of your comfort and your norm really tests you and your capability to be flexible and hospitable and be respectful as a guest and as a host.
Another piece of this we could tie into Asatru is the idea of fate. And it is very scary to do something like go across the world by yourself for the first time alone. But, we have to realize that if we need to truly believe in our fate, our plan, our life path, what the gods have planned for us. What happens to us is really never in our control. Anyone could have an accident any day, even if they stay in their house and never leave. It's like, so why would going across the world be any different than not, really?
Yeah.
If we're believing that, what happens to us is meant to happen. It's also believing and trusting in fate and in what the gods have planned for us as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Are you ready for our last segment?
Yes.
For those who are new to Asatru, what advice would you give them as they begin their journey?
So my biggest piece of advice for someone brand new is to read the primary sources. That is the first thing I did when I realized what heathenry was and that I wanted to follow this path, is I listened to an audiobook of the Elder Eddas, the Poetic Edda. That is the first thing I did. And that is what I recommend everybody does at the very beginning, is to just read your primary sources. There's lots of translations. It's very accessible. You can find them for free in PDF form online. Not just the Poetic Edda, but also the Prose Edda and several of the sagas. Read as much as you can about the things that were from the 6th century, like the 6th to the 10th century, is what I would suggest, because those are the primary sources. That is what we know as a fact came from people living in the period at the time.
Right.
Everything else, all the other guides are people's interpretations of that in some way, shape, or form. And before you start reading someone else's interpretation, no matter what it's based on, I feel personally that it's really important to have a baseline of what actually happened.
I think you're right. The Eddas are definitely the right place to start.
And if you would just want to start with the Havamal, that's fine. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's good for beginners to just stick with the Havamal without the context of the Poetic Edda.
Yeah.
Because the Poetic Edda is the oldest version of the Eddas, and it's the primary source, the like baseline of heathenry overall. Right. That Edda does contain the Havamal in it. So the whole Havamal is part of the Poetic Edda. So if you read the whole Poetic Edda, you'll not only get the Havamal, but you'll also get the context and the creation myths and all of the things about the deities. And I feel like that is really important for a beginner to understand what it is you're getting into. Even if it doesn't make that much sense, you know, that's okay because there's other resources. But knowing the baseline of what they were actually talking about way back in like the 10th century is a lot different than picking up an Asatru book that someone in modern times wrote about it.
Yeah, especially because it oftentimes contains their own unverified personal gnosis. It has their beliefs, not only their interpretation, but their belief. And if you don't read those sources, like our closest thing to that time, you're not going to understand those contexts and develop your own personal relationship with the gods and your own personal belief. Because it is going to... Are there any common misconceptions about Asatru or heathenry that you'd like to clear up?
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. One big one is the thing we're not supposed to talk about is like the bloodline. Like you have to come from a Norse background. There's so many reasons why that's problematic. It is unfortunately still a common misconception that a lot of new people have. Is, oh, my grandpa was Swedish, so I'm a Viking, so that means I can worship the gods. It's like, no, that's not how it works, you know. Like, that's a big misconception, but it's also very dangerous for a lot of people. And my firmly held belief around that is that the gods choose who they choose. Like, that's my firmly held belief. The gods called me to them. They've called many other people to them. If you feel like the gods are calling you to them, you have a right to answer that call. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you came from. It has nothing to do with your background, your heritage, nothing. If you're called to the gods, you have a right to answer that call. And the way you do that is going to depend on you. But it can start with understanding them and learning about them. You know, once you read those books, the Eddas and some of the sagas, you can then read the other books. Know what you feel in your heart to be true. Know what you think about the gods before you start reading about what other people think about them, is my opinion. And another misconception, I think, is that you have to have a kindred. I feel like that's one thing people get caught up on, is that they have to have a kindred to practice Asatru. You know, you have to have a Gothi. You have to have members in your kindred. You have to have this community of people in order to authentically practice it. And that is just simply not true. Again, the gods call to who they call to, and if you answer the call, you answer the call. If you choose not to answer the call, that's on you, but you have a right to answer that call if you want to. And if you are just sitting all alone with not a single pagan anywhere near you in the whole world, that's okay, because the gods chose you for a reason, and they hear you when you pray to them. It's like, that is not any less valid than a kindred gathering in a group, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I was a solo practitioner for a long time, and the only reason why I have a group right now is because I went looking for these people, and not all of us are Norse pagans. I just wanted someone to talk to about it, and then here I am with a big group. It's kind of cool that happens, and sometimes when you are a solo practitioner, your purpose sometimes is to facilitate making the group, and it's okay to be solo too. That's what
I also have been solo for a long time, many years. I feel like the deepest connection I've had with my deities has been alone. Because I'm not seeing them through any kind of filter. And it's great to practice with others, group ritual and things, but when you are by yourself, you're doing bloat yourself by yourself with no script. It's like that connection, that direct divine connection to how you interpret the gods is a very powerful thing. And I feel like that maybe possibly that might be part of why you don't have a physical kindred, because the gods want that connection before you get involved with other people. That's been my experience with it.
That's a beautiful perspective, honestly. It's more positive thinking than, oh, I'm a solo practitioner and I wish I had a kindred. But no, the gods want to spend time with you. They want to get to know you and you to know them and develop that correspondence. So that's really cool. I like that.
Thank you. It gives me hope.
Yeah. Do you have any closing remarks or last things that you want to say to newcomers, for not newcomers, for the community at large?
One thing I wanted to say for newcomers, or even people that have been practicing for a while, is if you feel like you're losing your faith, or you feel like you're not sure if this is your path, I would say pray to the gods and then meditate, because I strongly believe that prayer is a two-way street. Communication is a two-way street. And like, the prayer is talking to the gods, but divination and meditation, or even dreams, are the gods talking to you. So I would say, if you're doubting or you feel like you're stuck or something, send up some prayers. You don't have to put offerings with them or anything. You just talk to the gods, tell them how you feel, ask, is this the right path for me? Am I on the right path? Or just explain, you feel like your path is drifting, whatever it is. And then really pay attention to your dreams. If you can do divination, do it for yourself, or just meditate and listen for those answers, whether they come in symbols, thoughts, visions, your dreams, whatever. That is, in my opinion, a very strong and powerful way to get reconnected with Asatru, whether or not you have a community around you.
Great advice. Solid advice. All right, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Phoenix, for sharing your experiences, wisdom, and stories with us today. Before we go, where can our listeners find you if they want to connect or learn more?
That's a great question. So if you'd like to connect with me, whether for, religious guidance, or if you'd like a spiritual reading or rune reading, you can always find me across social medias at Chic Knormalle, CHIC, and then my last name, which is KNORMALLE. And I am on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and I'm on YouTube, I believe. Come find me if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to connect with me personally. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time. And thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Fireside Frith. If you enjoyed today's discussion, you can find us online at www.theasatrucommunity.com for our charter members sign up. Follow the link in the show notes, or if you have questions, stories, or reflections you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you at podcast@theasatrucommunity.com. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review to help others find us. Until next time, stay strong, stay curious, and keep God's watch over your path.
Bye.